Melissa Darnay joins me here today, and you can learn more about her and what she's up to by heading over to choosepanama.com. Choosepanama.com. You can kind of guess where this conversation might be going here today, but there is a book there you can get, a podcast that we're linking to. Now you're all over the place there, Melissa.
Yes, and those people who are watching us on video, the thing happening behind me is live in real time. So that's not a backdrop, that's a ship going through the Panama Canal.
Yeah, that's what was kinda I was gonna bring that up. Most people do those fake backgrounds to have scenes like this, but this is actually real.
This is real as it gets.
So is this the kind of weather a person typically expects in Panama? Like, it looks beautiful there today.
It is beautiful. It's typically in the 80s all year long. The hottest I've ever seen it is 93 degrees. The coolest is in the 70s. In the mountain areas, it'll get a little cooler. It'll be in the 70s, maybe with the low in the high 60s. But it is nice having one wardrobe in your closet. And it's nice not having to think about, you know, having a coat or things like that.
Sure. Well, it's this let's start things off. Like, how did you find your way to Panama? Because I understand you were from Texas, right?
Yeah, so I grew up in California and then I moved to Texas. I moved to Dallas, Texas to get married. And then unfortunately, my husband was killed in a car accident. So I was floundering a little bit and I was looking for, something to make me me again. And I had been at that point to about 30 different countries. And every time I went to a different country, I was like, could I live here? But I also needed to work. I was still in my 30s. So when I came to Panama for the first time, all of a sudden, those questions I started asking myself, the answer was yes. Can I live here? Yes. Can I make friends? Yes. Are there people to date? Yes. Can I work? Yes. Can I afford it? Yes. And I thought, you know what? Why not? There's nothing holding me in the US right now. I'm going to have an adventure. And I don't know if it's going to last 6 months or 5 years or longer, but I'm just going to go ahead and dive into that big ocean. And I did. And it's been the most incredible journey of my life. Now I've been here. I'm in my 13th year in Panama. I came in 2012. And every year just keeps getting better and better.
Well, what were some of the biggest cultural changes or like adapting to this new environment?
I'm a type A plus personality, and Latin America is a lot slower. So you do have to leave your type A plus at the border. Now I get by with about an A minus. We do have a Rolodex of people who can do things for you on a timely basis, but it's not like the US where you can make a phone call at 8 a.m. and get a plumber there by 8:30. So you do have to just bring your patience with you sometimes, but as long as you've got your patience, then so many things are easier here. A lot of people, when they come to, a place like Panama on vacation and they think, could I live there? A lot of people will choose to, instead of moving full time like I did, they'll choose to get a vacation property and each year maybe spend a little bit more and more time. So that was one culture shock. The second culture shock was I literally knew 5 words of Spanish. I wasn't, looking back to not only move here, but to open a business and not speaking Spanish, it was probably a little naive, but I've made it work. And now my Spanish is a lot better, but I'm still not fluent. There's so much English here, though. It does make it easy for those of us who don't speak Spanish.
Hmm. So, and that kind of leads me into what profession did you find yourself in now that you're in Panama?
Well, I came here to do real estate. I had gotten licensed in the United States, so I had gone through the education process. I had only worked a year in real estate in Dallas, and it wasn't really something I was looking at as a career. It was more self-education. But when it came time to move to Panama, I thought, okay, what am I going to do? And I thought, real estate. I had met some people in Panama who were expats who did real estate, and I was lucky enough to be taken under their wing. I worked for a couple different companies before I opened my own company. So it's been such an amazing experience.
Do you primarily tailor your practice then around people looking for vacation homes, trying to do the expat things themselves? What does your clientele look like?
Yes, our clientele is 100% expats, so English-speaking expats, and it could be someone who wants to move here, it could be someone who wants a vacation property, or it could be somebody who wants to diversify their investment portfolio. So those are the 3 things that we really focus on. The majority of what we offer is oceanfront property. There are a few mountain areas, though, that we do really like. But depending upon what someone wants, if they're wanting a vacation property, then it might be, something like in Playa Bonita on the beach. If they're looking for best return on investment to compete with the stock market, then we're going to look something in the city.
Okay. Well, you say oceanside property. It sounds like it's fairly expensive.
Compared to anywhere else in North America, oceanfront property is pretty much dirt cheap here. You can get absolute oceanfront condo starting under $200,000. Now, depending upon, where you are, that's gonna be a couple hours outside the city. It's gonna be about 750 square feet, but it's absolute oceanfront, and you own it title free and clear. Closer to the city, it's more expensive, just like anywhere else in the world. You might start about, $270,000 for absolute oceanfront, and then go up to $1,000,000 or more. So depending upon what your budget is, how much space you want, what you're looking for, that's going to depend upon where we're going to look. Again, if you want something for investment only, then we're gonna look in something like a business center. There's an area of Panama City that has over 120 multinational companies such as Estee Lauder, Procter& and Gamble, Nestle, Adidas. In that area, if something becomes available in the morning, it'll be rented again in the afternoon. So that is the best area right now for an investor who strictly wants return on investment.
Sure. Well, we can kind of go in a couple different avenues here.
Uh-huh.
Like, could you first of all, for those new to the concept, could you kind of break down what an expat is? Because to be honest with you, I think the only place that I have heard that is some of my fringe podcasts I listen to.
An expat is not a dirty word. It actually means expatriate. So, for example, I'm an American citizen. I'll always be an American citizen. I love the US. However, I also love living in Panama. So, I'm a permanent resident in Panama. I have my residency visa. So, anyone who is from, holds a passport from a different country, but lives in a country not their own, they're called expats. And that is a term once you start living somewhere outside of your own country, you become very familiar with. So we as expats, there's a lot of people that I deal with, they might have houses in a lot of different places. They might have their main house in the US and they might have something in Panama and something else in Portugal and something else in, the Cayman Islands. So where you live and your passport can definitely be different.
Yeah, the reason I bring it up is because my listeners know that I'm a bit of a libertarian on some things, and you run into that in the libertarian world
Oh, yes.
on
Yes.
some things, but I've also been running into this more and more frequently as people become retirement age, as they're
Uh-huh.
looking to stretch every penny. So
Right.
they're looking for places in South America where they can make better use of their retirement income.
Absolutely, and that is something that is so attractive right now. Panama, for me coming from Dallas, which was a very affordable city, the cost here is about 50% of what it was in the US, living a very similar lifestyle. In fact, I'd say a better lifestyle. So I drive the same sort of car, I live in the same sort of home. I go to the same sort of restaurants. The better part comes because now I have a full-time maid who, is part of the family. I have a guy Friday who does all the stuff for me that I don't want to have to do myself. And because the wages here are a lot lower, you can have things like that and have people to help you to make your life a little bit easier if you want.
Sure. You mentioned vacation homes. Are
Uh,
you finding quite a few people investing in like Airbnb type places?
yeah,
Is that what they're doing with those?
it's actually a good portion of our clientele. They wanna keep their US presence, but they just want a vacation home, someplace with better weather, more natural beauty, someplace they can escape to for a little while, especially people who live in a place with harsh winters. Right now, a lot of the owners are here enjoying their property because, like I said, it's 80 degrees every day with a nice breeze, and at home, it might be very cold. So, yeah, the vacation property owner, they're able to use it part-time and then Airbnb it when they're not using it to make it cash flow positive. So it's like vacationing for free.
Sure. Makes a lot of sense. I mentioned that some of the numbers that you're talking about, and we run into snowbirds all the time. I'm near Fargo, North Dakota. So, I mean, we're half a world away from each other. There's a lot of snowbirds that head to Arizona or other parts of the world in
Yes.
the winter. But what strikes me is some of the numbers that you're saying is relatively close to what I'm seeing in my backyard. And you don't have the scenery and nice warm conditions that you're experiencing.
Right. You mean the price of real estate?
Right.
Yes. When you look at oceanfront real estate, that's something, it's different to compare something from a smaller metropolitan area. It might be the same price, but what is less expensive is if you're comparing it to oceanfront in Florida, in Georgia, in California. I've done analyses not just of the purchase price, but of the carrying costs. And that's one of the places that Panama really shines. So, for example, the less than $200,000 beachfront condo, your carrying costs all in taxes, insurance, HOA, it's going to be about $350 a month, all in. Here, where I am, all in cost is going to be between $500 and $700 a month. Again, taxes, insurance, everything. So it does make it very easy to be able to make that money back if you're going to, even Airbnb it a few months out of the year.
We talked briefly about the cultural shift that you experienced, but how about as an entrepreneur? Like, have you, as a business owner, did you see any significant changes?
Panama is so business friendly. That's one of the reasons that after I was doing my research that I chose to make the leap to Panama. So many different places in the US are not so business friendly right now. And coming to a place that has, you know, it's so easy to open a business here, number 1. Number 2, the taxes are very low. So it's, for a corporation, it's 25% corporate taxes before write-offs, but they still allow a lot of write-offs that the US, used to allow. And a lot of the things, if you look at the businesses around you, just basic businesses like dry cleaners and, maybe a sporting sort of small business, a trampoline company or something like that. Panama still, as a young company, as a young country, does not have a lot of the businesses that you might find are oversaturated. So when you're thinking about starting a business, you don't have to really be as entrepreneurial and as creative as you would in the US. You could open what they consider a boring business here and just do it a little bit better. And maybe there's only one or two competitors. So that is something that's been very nice. One of the things, because I brought my, American work ethic with me, I've become one of the more successful real estate brokers in Panama because I treat my business like a business. And I know what my niche is. I'm not trying to, sell to Panamanians. I'm not trying to sell to Colombians. I'm only trying to have conversations with people who are from the same place I'm from and speak the same language that I speak.
Sure. But we're going to jump into that here briefly, but Before we do, I want to remind everybody you could learn more at choosepanama.com, choosepanama.com. That's going to be a clickable link in the show notes. If you found some value in what we're talking about so far, do us a quick favor, share this with one of your investor friends. And if you're watching us on YouTube, give us a quick like and subscribe. So, Melissa, let's dive into you finding this niche because
Mhm.
I think niching, we constantly hear there's riches in the niches.
For sure.
Did you happen to experience that when you decided who your audience was and what you were going to do?
I have a background in marketing, and one of the things that I've known for a long time is I know what segment that I'm really good at marketing to. And basically, people just like I am. So, people who are Gen X or baby boomers, people who have some extra money to invest, that is who I tend to attract. And that's been, throughout the course of my 13 years here. So if I look at who my customers are, they're people just like I am. They're people who want an adventure, who want something oceanfront, who want to be able to have something that's beautiful and safe and will appreciate. And again, because I'm basically talking to other people just like myself, I know who I am. So how easy is it to help other people just like me?
hmm Yeah, it's especially interesting that you said you know your audience, you talk and you work with those expats and people you're in your age group. But there had to have been, especially at first, the siren sound of letting anyone and everyone in, and you're trying to please everyone and anyone as you're trying to get your feet under you.
Right.
Did you fall into that trap, or did
For
you do
sure.
your best to avoid it?
For sure. No. And in a sense, it was really good for me because I had to learn everything about Panama real estate. So in the probably first 2 years, I was taking people to areas of town which are, where the locals live. And I was learning those areas, I was learning those buildings, and over time I came to realize, you know what, I'm spending a lot of time outside of where I should be focusing. And about 2 years in, I realized, you know what? It's gonna be better for me and it's gonna be better for my clients if I just say, "You know what? This area of town, it's not a good fit for you. You don't know this yet. You think you've read something about it, but it's really not a good fit for you, and here are the 3 reasons why." And I found that when I started saying that and taking charge of the conversation, people listen to me because I know what I'm talking about, but I had to go through that process of learning it for myself because Panama City was a new area for me. So in a sense, I'm glad I did it, but I don't do it anymore.
The concept of buying a property that's not in your backyard is a bit foreign to people, let alone across the world.
Uh-huh.
What are some of those things that we should be aware of if we're considering something like this? And I would imagine you don't want to go sight unseen and just buy stuff over the internet.
Right, and so many people when they get excited about a place, the first thing they wanna do is they wanna get online and search for themselves and come up with 17 properties that they wanna see. And that when you're dealing with a city that you've never been to or a city that you don't know very well, is a little bit misleading. So 2 things, when I first talk to someone, and usually we have a conversation by Zoom or over the phone to get things started. And so not only are we talking about, what you're looking for, whether it be an investment property, a forever home, or a vacation home, I'm also going to talk to you about what's your exit strategy. Is this something you want to keep forever, put in a trust and leave to your children? Is this something you want to hold for a couple of years and then sell and make a profit? Is this something that you want to use as a vacation property until it doesn't make sense anymore? Once we know what your exit strategy is, I can help you find the best thing for you to purchase because it's not just about the first little bit of happiness you get when you move in, but it's also about the appreciation and making sure that this property will tick all of your boxes so that you're happy with it, not just this year, but next year and the year after.
Well, would you mind sharing a few numbers with us?
Sure.
Like, let's start with the rental property. You mentioned it maybe going downtown where some of the corporations and stuff are.
Yes.
What are the rents like? How does those typically pencil out?
So for example, the area is called Costa del Este. And again, this is an area that has special tax benefits for these multinational companies. So there's a reason that they're there. When you go into an elevator, pretty much in any part of this neighborhood, everything's in English because they're not just people from Panama living there, they're people from the United States, from Japan, from, all over the world. So English is that universal language. So that's number 1. Number 2, for example, like Procter& and Gamble, they've got, thousands of people just with Procter& and Gamble. So in this one area of town, there's about 20,000 expats, not including their families, but just 20,000 people working in this one area. So you've got 20,000 families, excluding people who are retired or just want to live there who don't work there. So you've got such demand for real estate. In the beginning, and this is one of the first true planned communities in Panama City. So they have a lot of bigger apartments that might be, 700,000 to $1 million. Those are going to be like 3,000 to 5,000 square feet. They realize though, with the transience of a lot of the executives, they might only be here for a year or 2, or they might be based somewhere else and spend just a certain amount of time in Panama, whether it's a week, a month, or, half time. So they started coming up with smaller units that were more affordable and that made more sense for these, kind of mid-level management expats. So those are gonna range anywhere from about 800 square feet to about 1,500 square feet. In that range, it's going to be somewhere between $2,000 to $3,000 a month in rent, and to purchase something like that, it's going to start about $225,000.
So it sounds like you can hit that, the fabled 10% rule pretty easy.
Yeah, in Costa del Este, the average return on investment, it's right about 10%. Some of the buildings skew a little bit more, but we're typically pretty comfortable with that 10%, yes. And that
Sure.
doesn't include, appreciation.
Well, let's go to like people who are considering like an Airbnb, and I'd
Mhm.
imagine they're looking at oceanfront property for something like
Correct.
that.
For sure. Yes.
So what are you seeing in that realm, and what type of amenities are you typically suggesting?
So the best place for Airbnb is going to be someplace like where I am, which is just outside the city limits. Before the Airbnb boom back in 2012, Panama City did pass a law that prohibited short-term rentals under 45 days. And they did this at the time because Panama was trying to attract more hotels to invest in Panama. So they had just signed deals with the Hilton, that did both the Hilton and the Waldorf, and they passed the law. So right where we are, you can still do short-term rentals, and the apartments here will start for purchase about $275,000, and like I say, go up to about $1 million. You can rent, a couple days, a week, a month, a year, whatever you'd like. This is a nicer area because we are on a small private beach, um, right outside the city. I don't know if many people know the location of Panama, but it is the southernmost country in Central America, and it links to both on the north, it links to Costa Rica, and on the south, it links to Colombia. If you're going, um, south, so from Panama City, this is the only beach. So there's no other beach between Panama City and all the way to Colombia. So for someone who wants beachfront, this is a great option. People who come here for a week or 2 all the different things that are on their sightseeing bucket list are very close to this area. So it is a location that's very sought after. Um, the occupancy is going to range depending upon the view and the size. It could range anywhere from 50% to 100% occupancy, depending upon a couple different factors.
Sure. So I'd be curious, like development wise, you mentioned that Panama joins Costa Rica and
Uh-huh.
Colombia.
Uh-huh.
Uh, do you see like a significant different amounts of development on either side of that divide?
It's not so much the north and south, but it's the east and west. So on the west side of the country is the Pacific Ocean, and that is where most of the development is. The Caribbean slash Atlantic side is a lot more rural, and the development is not as expansive on that side. So if you're looking for, really to unplug from the world, the Caribbean side, might be attractive, but you're also not going to have the same infrastructure and amenities. So if for somebody who really wants like high speed internet and first world grocery stores and banks and restaurants, you will want to stay on the Pacific Ocean side.
Panama has been whether the residents there like it or not has obviously been in the news cycle, at least in the United States.
Yes.
What is the thoughts and that you've heard locally regarding some of the things that have been discussed?
Well, I don't think it's been widely publicized, but they did sign a deal. Um, so one of the issues was that there are basically 2 sides of the canal, and on one side was owned by a Panamanian company that owned the, shipping or the crane companies that would take the shipping containers off the ships, and on the other side, there was a Hong Kong-based company. So they're selling the interest of that Hong Kong-based company to BlackRock. So it will be a US-based, um, company very soon.
Yeah, you can expect BlackRock to find its way in there somehow, won't they?
Exactly, they've got their fingers in the pot, don't they?
So, well, this has been a very interesting conversation. I'm just going to point everybody to your site again, choosepanama.com, choosepanama.com. Before we jump into anything else, is there anything I should have asked? We might have missed?
One thing I wanna say, a lot of people don't really understand what life might be like in Panama, and on my podcast on YouTube, which is the Panama Podcast, we do talk a lot, not just about real estate, we talk a lot about lifestyle, things like what it's like to go to the grocery store, what it's like to get your driver's license, what it's like to make friends. So all those, what we'll call soft issues, I think I'm the only one talking about those as an expat in Panama. So if you're curious, go ahead and take a look.
Yeah, I was like, you mentioned one of the things that keeps sticking to me here is the pace.
Yes.
Like, was that hard to get used to?
Yes and no. Panama City is a fairly fast-paced city. It is a big city, but sometimes people get it's okay in Panama to say, I'll be there at 10 o'clock today and then not show up until 4 o'clock. Culturally, that's still okay. Or, for example, we're just getting out of a 5-day holiday. So it's okay to just shut off your phone and your email and not answer anything for 5 days. Whereas, the American expats who are here, we're still working over the holidays. We're still checking our texts and our emails. So I would say it's a blend of the more laid back family culture versus, bringing our own culture in it as well.
That would be another good question is how family friendly is it? Like you mentioned.
Extremely, extremely. Latin America in general is very family oriented, and Panama, being a nice Catholic family oriented country, is all about the family. Everything is about their children, everything is about their parents and the grandparents. So if you're coming here as an elderly person, let's say you're in your 80s, you're coming here, everyone is going to take amazing care of you. My next door neighbor is 88 years old, and the Panamanian people treat him like he's gold. And for him, coming from Michigan, he just feels like every day he feels that it's so special to be treated with so much reverence and respect.
Well, I appreciate those insights. Well, if you're ready, we'll jump into the rapid fire questions and close out this episode. And I'm going to throw you a curveball.
Okay.
The first one I'm going to ask is, what do you miss from the US?
What do I miss? I miss next day shipping from Amazon. I can get Amazon, it takes about a week.
Oh, really? They do ship there, though.
Yes, you can get it through, mailboxes, etcetera. Yes.
Okay. If you could go back in time and give your younger self a piece of advice, what would it be?
I would have done this a lot sooner, for sure.
Sure. What lie do real estate investors often tell themselves?
That every investment is going to be a home run. Not everyone is, but some are just fun.
Do you have a book recommendation or what are you reading right now?
My book recommendation, my favorite book that I read every year is Persuasion by Robert Cialdoni. I just think it's one of those books that everyone needs to read at least once.
And finally, what single strategy or tool have you implemented that has had a big time saving impact to you or your business?
I think automations in today's world, we have to use all of the, AI and other automations that can help the tedious tasks, repetitive tasks get easier and take them off our plates.
Well, I appreciate it, Melissa. Again, it is choosepanama.com, choosepanama.com. That's going to be a clickable link in the show notes, but it's great meeting you and I hope you come back again sometime.
Thanks so much for having me. Cheers from Panama. Bye.